Happy Mercury Day, Collective. Hope everyone's doing well. So, I just want to do a little check in and tell you guys a really cool story about an event I went to tonight and how it relates to the full moon tomorrow, January 25th, in the sign of Leo. Now, if you watched my most recent video on Pluto and Aquarius, I had mentioned that Leo is the polarity of Aquarius. So, Leo being a fixed fire sign and Aquarius being a fixed air sign, they are sister signs. And I had also pointed out to where if you know a Leo and an Aquarius, you might notice some very like distinct similarities, but like them going about things in totally different ways. Um, and so tomorrow's full moon in Leo being opposite on the wheel, if you're looking at it, to Pluto having just moved into Aquarius and going into the themes of transformation, personal transformation, and transformation um, that kind of manifests outwardly in the context of like the broader social sphere, but within like the micro sphere of our own lives, and how that kind of is working and at play with just the natural energy of a full moon, which is the culmination of like the buildup from the last moon. So my first video of a lunar cycle this year was the new moon in Capricorn. So what we're talking about right now is the buildup of energy from that January 11th new moon in Capricorn, ruled by Saturn, and it working its way and building up to that bright lunation in the sky of the full moon that we're gonna see tomorrow in the sign of Leo. And as I've said, Leo is ruled by the sun. So when we look at where the sun is, it's now in Aquarius. So we've got this unique sort of illumination point of the energies of Leo and Aquarius, and how when you look at what's going on in Aquarius now with the sun and Pluto, and you have that full moon occurring in Leo, we are essentially looking at the themes of Leo, like the individual, the sort of the bright, like the center, the leader, the lion, represented by the lion, and royalty, regalness. We look at that in the context of Aquarius, the group, the collective, the progressive causes. Like you might look at like things that are concerned with like humanity as a whole and the progress of us all, and how like we're all sort of one and our fates are intertwined. So you think like, how can we reconcile those energies? Um, and so it's interesting when you see how that works with the energy of Pluto. You might see this as sort of this invitation um, to have the courage to assert your individuality and your gifts and like the ways that you shine as leader, um, and using that creative dramatic flair of a Leo and really finding that within yourself and pulling it to the surface and then bringing it out into the collective and asserting your individuality within the whole. That is really what the theme of this full moon is asking you to do, which if you've watched any of the other videos, you might find that to be like sort of an echo of like some of the other transits, and finding your inner authority and using your creativity as a way to sort of get on that path of like self-integration and like marrying your dark and your light. It's all sort of like culminating in this like very seemingly deliberate cosmic dance to invite you to like stop hiding in the background of your own life. Stop doing that thing to where you talk yourself out of asserting your unique gifts and your individuality for things important to you in the whole. Don't be afraid to find your place in the sun like a Leo, but doing it as an equal, no more, no less, among the collective, like finding your tribe, finding your people that share in your passions. And so I want to tell you how this really works in so just almost like in a way I could not have planned better. Um, So one of my friends, who is a Leo rising and a Leo sun, so very Leo, um, had told me about this event that was going on at our local coffee shop, and it was this event that was, so that our favorite like local coffee shop, attached to them, it's something they recently created. It is part of the coffee shop. It's called Wanderlust Books, and so the coffee shop I'm talking about is No Rock Cafe, and attached to it is a place called Wanderlust Books. And so they sort of use this as like this community hub, for different people with like various interests and various causes. And tonight's presentation was, on behalf of the Saving the Endangered Red Wolf Species of North Carolina. And you may or may not have heard of the red wolf, and maybe you didn't even know that that was like a thing that exists, let alone something that's endangered. So this presentation, it was just like essentially this culmination of people, um, different people, different backgrounds, and they just found themselves like together with this one shared cause, this one shared passion, and they kind of pooled all their resources and talents and gifts and passions and created this documentary, to bring awareness to the endangered red wolf species in North Carolina. And so, of course, it's like this collaboration of like conservationists and, you know, naturally humanitarian drives that like bring people to these things, because as this channel is always like eager to point out, it's it's like we're all one, really. I talk about the plants, and I talk about the planets, and I talk about our animals, and then I talk about us like as people, on this earth, with all these things, how we're never really going to be, feel whole and like in alignment with ourselves by considering ourselves an island, you as a person amongst others, but like you as a person amongst a wider like, system of living things, like our plant life and our animal life and all the things that, when you immerse yourself in them, generally, they generally will inspire awe within you that you, can't really get anywhere else. And so it's sort of like, that healing power of nature, and like the whole premise of therapeutic horticulture as like a method of like bringing people back to themselves. It's meant to essentially, remind you of like how precious everything that we have, here on earth is, not only just for the sake of these things and the beauty and the awe they inspire, and the like ecosystem within which we all operate, but just for our own wellness and for our own not only ability to, continue to survive here on this earth, but, for our own, understanding of like the interconnectedness of us with other people, but all the other living things. So I really thought that this was an interesting place to find myself tonight, because it was really just a thing that I didn't know was happening. And it took my friend sort of bringing it up, who's like now embarking on this sort of journey of photography himself, having nothing to do with his day job. We actually went to law school together. So, the thing that essentially brought us to that event, aside from just like being coffee lovers and lovers of that business, is, it's like, well, let's show up, like, and like sort of immerse ourselves in like a community of people that, while not like literally doing the same things that we're doing, sort of taking those steps, like taking that inspired action, you might say, to start, putting yourselves in spaces, that are new and different, but that you suspect, are sort of in alignment with like where you're trying to go. And wouldn't you know, I'm like teasing my friend who like rarely knows what I'm talking about when I like, drop these like little astro nuggets on him. And I was just like, say, oh, well, this is like the perfect event, as the full moon in Leo's the next night, and you being a Leo rising and a Leo sun. And he's just like, I mean, whatever you say, if you say so. Um, and so it's funny, because I get back from this event and I'm like, I got to talk about this. I got to like share this cause. I think it's great. Um, for lots of reasons. And wouldn't you know, the name of this full moon, the January full moon? Do you want to know what the name of the January full moon is? It's the wolf moon. Can you believe it? I couldn't believe it. I was just like, well, this, I definitely have to make a video of it now. So this wolf moon, the full moon in Leo occurring on January 25th, asking you to, acknowledge your fear, acknowledge that fear about sort of like going off that well beaten path and like trailblazing something new, even if it has nothing to do with your day job. Just simply because that's where your creative gifts are taking you. That's where your inspired action is like leading you, and to find your people. And you don't even have to know exactly what's going to happen next. Just show up and like present yourself as you are, an individual within the group, and let the magic happen from there. And it's just sort of it's sort of humbling sometimes when you do that and you make connections and you like just introduce yourself and you hear the stories of the people behind these causes. That's really where I want to go with this. Is the presentation began with like I said, this group of people who had careers that had nothing to do with photography and like coming together and creating like this documentary, this small wildlife documentary about this endangered species. Um, we had one person who found themselves used to be in corporate finance, and then they were just like, you know what, like this ain't it, and found themselves behind the lens of a camera. And we had someone else who was like in like law enforcement, like on a path of like law enforcement, and then like thinking about becoming like a marshal, and then all of a sudden they're like, this ain't it, and then they find themselves like behind the lens of a camera and like really passionate about conservation causes. Like, and you have all these people from these disparate walks who just like were called in another direction, and they couldn't quite put their finger on it, but they just took the inspired action, and against like what might seem prudent from the outside looking in terms of how we're socialized to think about our role in lives, and like what we're supposed to do versus like what we're called to do, and not really knowing how everything is going to work out, but saying like, yeah, I have this like job path right here where all the like steps have been laid out before me. There's no question about what step to take next, and like where presumably an income can come from. The courage that it takes to get off that path, and to not know how it's going to work out, but to let your heart sort of guide the way. That's exactly what the energy of this full moon is. And so I found it just incredible. Like none of these people, presumably, that were like, we're going to put this presentation on at the local coffee shop January 24th. I would bet everything that I have that not one of them was like, oh, that's perfect. That's the wolf full moon, the night before the wolf full moon in Leo. Um, and so that's why I had to get on here and talk about this, not only to bring sort of like awareness on behalf of like the work that they did that was inspirational to me, but awareness to you all watching, who, I talk about my own path and sort of like, yeah, I know I have a lot of grief, but here I am on this channel talking about the plants and the planets and the animals and us, like, and oneness and all that. And yet here were all these people that were, the whole beginning of the presentation was like taking turns saying, I used to do this and here I am doing this now. And giving us like sort of the background story of how they all got together and made this little documentary happen, and like all the obstacles actually that were involved, like primarily that none of them were actual filmmakers, and how one little lucky break, like them sort of putting out the mess, like letting the mess be part of like the whole story on social media, and then like having like these people watching, and then just against all odds, like an angel donor coming out of nowhere and like hitting them with like $3,000 to get a proper film editor to like make it all happen. Things that like nobody really knew how it was going to come to fruition, but they just had the audacity to show up and be like, well, we're going to make this work. Who wants to give up their weekends for the next like 2 months? Well, here we go. And it was that that courage in the cause, and like how things just tended to work themselves out because of that sort of inspired action that each of them took, but then came together, and like it's almost like the whole became greater than the sum of the parts, sort of thing. So of course I have to bring out the strength card in tarot. The eighth major arcana, and the strength card is a card associated with Leo. So quite apt in terms of like the Leo full moon, but extremely extremely apt for everything I've just laid out for you. And you see on this card, you've got this girl. She's wearing a white robe with like adorned with flowers. So it suggests sort of like this like purity of heart. Like the heart, again, we associate with Leo, like courageous. And of course, the lion, a very literal representation of Leo. And the girl, despite being this like seemingly delicate, gentle, receptive, feminine energy, is like courageously like sort of like pressing the lion's mouth closed, but not with force, but just like with this gentleness and this trust, um with like this like untamed beast, you might say. And the lion doesn't look distressed, and the lion doesn't look threatened. The lion doesn't look like a threat to her, despite it being a lion and her being like a girl in a white gown. And the whole image of this card is very much sort of like that unique interplay of like the gentle touch, um going hand in hand with courage, like how just because you have this like sort of you surrender to that like sort of softer energy, and that like that vulnerability in a way, exposing yourself to this like perilous situation, it seems, um while commanding that authority in that situation. That's exactly what she's doing. I mean, there's no question about who's in charge here. She's like, essentially saying, we're going to close your mouth, like ferocious beast. But she's not doing it forcefully. It's just like that strength and presence and courage, that goes hand in hand with the softness and the receptive feminine energy. That is the symbolism of this card. And of course, she's got the infinity symbol, much like the magician in the last video. And that infinity symbol essentially, representing the fact that like your state, on the inside, your state, your inner state, is essentially going to be reflected on like your outer circumstances. So it's like with the magician card, with the scepter to the sky and the hand pointing at the ground, it's sort of like the as above so below. And this card is very much giving, as within so without. It's reminding you of that oneness, that sort of you exist simultaneously in the soft and the commanding presence, like in vulnerability and in courage, and in the spiritual realm, in the physical realm, like you exist simultaneously, in those states. And there's nothing, I think, more apt to describe what is being asked of you, especially with this Pluto energy in Aquarius. And surely you feeling the tug in some area of your life for some sort of transformation. Kind of have to like trust yourself. Like, I guess the takeaway is almost reinforcing that message of surrender. Like these people that just got up and said, here we are advocating on behalf of the red wolf, endangered species, like and us like using our gifts up to this point that actually were beneath the surface. They were gifts that didn't necessarily manifest in the way that they made their money every day. And these are full grown people who, like, they weren't just sort of like fresh out of college and like bright eyed and bushy tailed. They made these decisions. And it took a courage for sure to understand that, like, a lot of people looking in, probably wouldn't understand it. And that was fine. That was fine. There's a courage that it takes to embark on this totally different path that is from a place of inspiration and wanting to be more in alignment with like something greater than just like this place that I show up, is where I get money. It was like this recognition in the soul of something more out there for them. And so I want to make sure I say these sites. I met this, and I'm sorry I don't remember all the names, but I spoke at the end of the presentation to a great woman. Her name is Cassia Rivera. I hope I'm saying the last name correctly. And I really wanted her to know that like she's very much like this sort of like I would say she's like this conduit, like this bridge builder. It's like she sees these people, these disparate parts, and she's like, how can we make something happen with this? Like the that sort of like wrangling of energies and like seeing the cause and the potential and like stepping in and being like, let's bring it all together. Um, and so I wanted, to just say, like, from the outside looking in, and just like as anyone who watches this channel knows, like the themes of this channel, how I couldn't help but be drawn to sort of the underlying stories, like the beneath the cause stories, and that being the stories of those people. And so I just said, for what it's worth, like I really enjoyed the little tidbits, albeit just a small part of the presentation, of this person saying, yeah, in my past life I did this, and like, yeah, I left this job to do this. Um, I think that's really where a lot of the magic is, that almost as like an inextricable part of the grander cause of um, bringing awareness to these endangered red wolves of North Carolina. So she seemed, I was, to my delight, she was delighted to hear that feedback, because, it was far from my intention to go up there and be like, well, here's my professional critique. It was like sort of this like moment of inspired action. I was like, oh, I hope these people know that their stories, like I personally would want to hear more. I want to hear like the nuts and bolts. Like I want to hear, okay, like spend a little more time. I want to pull that thread of like, okay, so what was it like? Like, what was your first step in leaving this day job? Like, what did you start to do to prepare your life to be like, well, I'm going to be out in these fields, like hoping a red wolf comes out so I can maybe get a snapshot of it that maybe will be good quality enough to maybe put a documentary together. And yet, like, they all did those things. So I just, was sort of like picking her brain and like kind of getting little nuggets from her that I found inspirational. And then I was just giving my 2 cents about like, how I really am inspired by any story that makes the nexus between the state of our natural world, whether it be the plant life and like the animal life, habitats, whatever, and linking it to like human well-being. And they did it very well in their documentary. They even linked it to like traffic fatalities, like talking about these roads going to and from like the coastal areas, and like how they cut right through these endangered red wolf habitats, and how this like kind of interaction between like the day to day, the mercury rules cars and travel, in your car, that very mercurial activity of like the trade and the commerce in your car, going across the roadways of the state, and like how that can interfere with these like natural cycles that we all still have to like live in harmony with, and like what can we do to find a way to make these things coexist. And so that's what I like. It's like a conservationist cause that isn't like death to the cars and death to the like the modern life, because that's not how you get things done. What these people are doing is they're really pushing to have like these sort of wildlife sort of like crossings, and like you may or may not have heard of these things, but naturally, as you can imagine, just like with any sort of infrastructure project, it costs money, it's expensive. So like there's like, it's very much an uphill climb. It probably feels a lot like Sisyphus, like, where you take a lot of steps forward, and then like there's like the steps back, for all the reasons that you can imagine come along with like pushing for major structural changes to the status quo, but not being uh, not being held back by those obstacles, and then just like pushing forward either way. And so there's a website. There's 3 websites that, if you're interested in this, the first is the North Carolina Wildlife Corridor.org, and that's sort of like their whole push for, you know, zooming in on these areas, these key areas, to where, you can't take the roads out. Like we all got to live with the reality of that. But what can we do to like add to that? Maybe create like this safe crossing within these habitats of these places that we are going to have the commerce and the travel and like the hustle and bustle of modern life. Maybe we can add something to certain key areas to create a safe crossing for some of these endangered populations. And the red wolves aren't the only wildlife out there that are affected by these highways going to and from our coastal areas. So that's one thing you can look into, North Carolina Wildlife Corridor.org. If you want to see the documentary, it's just pretty short. It's like 10 minutes. I totally would encourage you to go check it out. It's called Rite of Passage, RIGHTOF Passage, PASSAGEE.info. And you'll come across the short documentary that we are all presented with tonight. And then there's this other nonprofit that was there, championsforwildlife.org. And I'm sorry, I can't remember these two people's names. There's like a lot of names and like sensory input for me. But they actually have this nonprofit, and they have the wisdom of seeing the benefit of getting the young people involved and like making it relevant to them, because they are essentially like the stewards of these causes. And you know as we all know, there's no better way to like get something to get more momentum than to get young people involved. And like especially from what I see, the youth now, like environmental causes are very much right up their alley. And so these people, they have a great program where they like bring art into it, because art speaks like a universal language. And there are many ways that art manifests. Like art can be through spoken word, it can be through like painting and photography, but also like sculpting. The man that is part of this championsforwildlife.org nonprofit, he's actually like a sculptor, I believe, of like of wildlife subject matter. So they go in they work with schools, and they don't charge the schools. Like, so their nonprofit is aimed towards raising money so they can like do these programs and go in and like raise awareness about these endangered red wolves. And like they do like sculpt, get the kids in on it, and like they sculpt the red wolves. And like it's just sort of like this, because we all know we are here in the 3D world, and we kind of like our little objects as our visual cues. I think it's a really effective thing that they do. It seems simple, but that's where the brilliance is, if you really want the kids to remember like the red wolves and how precious they are, there's nothing better than to like create an art project out of it. So they go into the schools and like they work with the young folks, and like then the young folks get really enthusiastic about these things that they've created, and they go home and they like talk to their family, whoever wants to hear about it or whoever doesn't, I'm sure. And so it's just sort of this really special network that's been created amongst all these people. And I just was really I was very enthusiastic about it. And I wasn't, the red wolves, of course that's like an important cause. And like you see the images and you're like, wow, the numbers are like startling. There's like it's like 11 known, and then like maybe as many as 22. I mean, that's it. That's an exceptionally small amount in terms of like within our state of this population of wolves. So like there are a lot of aggressive efforts that have gone into saving this species. So I really was very moved by the people behind it just as much as the cause, because I think that that's really um, how you move people. It's like storytelling. And part of that is pulling the thread of like, so what made you leave this very comfortable, well-worn path to like embark on this new thing? So I did find too, I had to take out my little, I love this dictionary of symbols. And I was like, what does it say about wolves? Because as they began with, especially when you're raising awareness, you're like, people hear wolves. And well, here in North Carolina, I'm an NC State alum. So I think of wolf pack, and I have good association. Now, if you went to Carolina or Duke, you might not. But anyways, that's a whole nother thing. But just in the layperson terms, you think of a wolf, you're like, ooh, wolves. Like, why are we saving wolves? And so part of that raising awareness is not just like raising awareness about the fact that they're endangered, but raising awareness based on like the sort of the nature of them, like how they're not these things to fear, these creatures of the night that are out to get you. Sort of like a lot of storytelling of our child, the big bad wolf, those things sort of like live or ingrained in our brains. And so I was like, well, what does the dictionary of symbols have to say about it naturally? And so I found this very interesting, a very interesting tie-in to the Leo wolf full moon. And in this book, it says it talks about how just like lots of things in history, there's like a positive, like more positive and negative connotations and symbolism, usually both associated with things. But when you really get down to the nuts and bolts of it, it says the symbolism of the wolf would be regarded as positive from the fact that it can see in the dark. And I just thought, see in the dark, interesting here at the Moonflower Collective, where it's grow in the light but bloom in darkness. How like the whole namesake of this channel is the fact that moonflowers, unlike most other flowers that we're familiar with, they bloom in darkness. And it's like the whole metaphor of you in a dark place and how the brightest parts of you can often be unearthed from the realm of Pluto, you might say, in the darkest times of your life. And so I thought, like, what an interesting immediate connection it makes to like a wolf being able to see in the dark is itself a positive marker for it, because that relates it to the sun. It says, hence, it becomes a symbol of light, of the sun, of the warrior and hero, and of the mythic ancestor. And I was like, can this be more literally related to the themes of Leo? Leo, the one sign of the zodiac whose planetary ruler is the sun, the main luminary. The sun is the giver of life on Earth, and it's the one part of our solar system that doesn't move. It's immovable, actually. All the other things orbit the mercy of the sun. So when you think about something that like these wolves, and like the fact that a wolf being associated actually symbolically in a positive light, because it denotes like the sun and the bringer of light to darkness. So leave you with that little tidbit on why symbolism of like a cause that I just didn't even know about, an event that really I just stumbled upon because a friend who is a Leo rising and a Leo sun was like, I feel like I should go to this event. And I'm like, yeah, we definitely should. And not really having any expectations or anything. And now here I am presenting to you, whoever you are, wherever you are, the cause of saving the endangered red wolves in North Carolina. So once again, riteofpassage.info is where you can get the little 10-minute documentary. North Carolina wildlifecorridor.org is the website, and the sort of what's next phase of like getting these sort of corridors, these safe little passageways for these endangered species, since we all have to coexist in these spaces. And then the championsforwildlife.org nonprofit that sort of extends that awareness to the young people of our state. So I think that covers the whole lesson of the full moon in Leo. I did write down here as sort of like little takeaway advice to keep in mind is to be present in your fears instead of pushing them down. So the goal isn't to just pretend like you're fearless. Like after all, you are like in the presence of a lion with its mouth open, right? I mean, in order to stand in courage, you kind of have to be implicitly aware of the fact that there's something to be courageous in the face of, right? So you have to acknowledge the fear so that you can muster the courage. Like, but remember, you're the master, right? Um, and approaching an obstacle with calm confidence is actually, I hesitate to say always. Like, I don't like to speak in absolute terms, but maybe in this case, I will. Calm confidence is always. I'll just be audacious and say it is always going to be the bringer of better results for everyone involved than sort of a domineering presence. You don't have to be domineering to exhibit strength. You don't have to be a threat to command authority in a room. Don't forget that. So I hope I brought a little bit of like insight, I guess, into the energy of tomorrow's full moon in Leo. And I hope I brought some awareness to the cause of the endangered red wolf species in North Carolina. And